Several things that separate the humans from each other are religion, language, gender, poverty, but above all, race. Many times, people judge others by their color, and no one can deny that. To this day, cases of racism are heard all over the world. In fact, the event that you will see now has to do with what we have mentioned. Greetings, and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please subscribe to support our channel. Also, press the alarm bell and turn on YouTube notifications on your phone. Thank you, and enjoy. Our main character was a beautiful white and blonde girl who had a bad idea about a particular race due to everything that was being heard about it. And one day, her biggest fear was fulfilled. In fact, she never thought that one day she would be surrounded by 4 wild African aborigines, and what they did was something she never imagined. It all happened when 4 African men were carrying with some sticks on their shoulders the food for the next day. They belonged to a tribe considered very wild. Likewise, they were in charge of getting food for the rest of their tribe, who lived far from civilization. While walking through the middle of the jungle, they saw in the distance something that seemed to be a dead animal, so they ran, thinking that perhaps it was some small wild boar that could serve as food. So they decided to approach, but when they arrived, they were amazed by what they saw, because what was in front of them was not an animal at all. It was a white woman lying on the floor who apparently didn't show signs of life. They had never seen anything like this before. The men didn't know what to do. They were amazed to see something so different from them. Suddenly, the chief ordered the rest of the Aborigines that it would be better to know if she was alive or not. So he asked his subordinates to proceed to take her to the tribal healer, and they immediately started following his command. However, one of them said that it would be better to leave the food they had to carry her with their sticks and avoid hurting her. So they made what appeared to be a handmade stretcher, and upon reaching their destination, the rest of the tribe was impressed by what they brought. The chief asked the healer to check her immediately. He fearfully began to examine her, and when he pressed her leg, he observed that she was moving it. He quickly knew that the woman was alive, but very weak, and even noticed that her breathing was very slow and her heart wasn't beating as it should. So he asked his assistants to proceed to make a natural medicine with herbs and then give it to her. They also had to warm her because her body was very cold and pale. After taking that infusion, the young woman felt a very bitter taste that even made her vomit. However, the Aborigines asked her to drink it again, as that would help her recover. Although she didn't understand any of their words, she realized by their gestures all that they asked of her, and the only thing she could do was trust these people. Although, of course, she was terrified. Then they left the young woman alone next to a campfire. This is where she began to cry and remember how she got there. It all happened one day in the morning. Sarah Meyer received terrible news. Behind the phone, the voice of her stepmother could be heard. "Your father went surfing and he lost his life. I'm sorry, my dear," were her words. That lady didn't even seem to be sad, however. Sarah succumbed to grief and wouldn't stop crying. She still didn't believe that that was true, and she decided to travel to be able to say goodbye to her dear father. At night, she traveled to that country that conquered her father's heart. Upon arrival, she was surprised that her father had already been buried. In fact, long before she received the call from her stepmother. That infuriated her, and memories came back to her of how her father met that woman. It was 15 years ago when the man traveled to Tanzania for tourism. There he met Diara, a slender and very beautiful young African woman. Her father was impressed with her, and the most surprising thing was that this woman could talk in Spanish very fluently. Likewise, it was Diara who approached him to get to meet him. At that time, Sarah was finishing secondary school in her country when she found out that her father had started a relationship with an African woman much younger than him. She didn't like that, but her father was very happy. In fact, she had not seen him so happy since her mother passed away, and if he was happy, there was nothing more to do. This is how the man who was about to retire made a decision that for many would be very hasty, to marry Diara and spend his life in a country that fascinated him. He was really very much in love. Likewise, he decided to invest his savings in the African country, thus becoming the owner of 4 hotels and 3 restaurants. In fact, before that man got married, he invited his daughter to meet Diara, who was very nice and personable. However, after the marriage, her attitude began to change. Sarah remembered what happened on many occasions. "I'm sorry, but your daughter should go back to her country. She does nothing but spending money. Wasn't she going to study at a university in Spain? Why do you keep supporting her?" Sarah listened as Diara spoke to her father. She also remembered something that woman told her father, that her only daughter should pay a rent for living in one of the hotel rooms that he had. The worst thing of all was when once the young wife organized a party where all her relatives were invited, even the neighbors, except Sarah. Yes, and what hurt her most was that her father kept quiet and allowed all that. She began to change. Sadly, the man didn't realize that Diarra was turning him against his daughter, and for that reason, the young woman decided to return to her country. At first, her father sent her money and called her constantly, but little by little, that stopped happening. Once, Sarah heard how the woman spoke to him. "Hang up the phone already. Don't you see that call is expensive?" The last straw was that the woman did used to spend a lot on clothes, makeup, and parties. Sarah hoped that her father would one day realize that that was not the right way to behave and would reconsider things. That man was always a good swimmer and a good surfer. It was his favorite sport from a very young age, and now she couldn't believe that he was no longer alive. And so, she decided to go to her father's house to claim the inheritance. Sarah was very angry, and she wouldn't let others to keep what her father achieved with his effort. At the end of the day, she was his only child, and she knew that she could claim everything he had left. When she arrived, she knocked on the door, but one of the guards prevented her from entering. That made her even more angry. Diarra heard the scandal that her stepdaughter was making and decided to go and talk with her, or rather, to yell at her. "Long time no see. What a horrible daughter. Sure, now that your dad died, you come to claim your share, right? I'm sorry, dear, but my lawyer put it all in my name. Also, it was your father's last decision. The hotels and restaurants are now mine, and neither you nor anyone else will take them away from me. Now, you better go to your country. You have nothing to do here." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing, and she had no choice but to rent a place to stay because she wasn't going to leave without doing something. The girl located a lawyer, and thanks to him, she managed to access her father's house. She was only able to get half the land, and that same lawyer told her that she could take everything from the woman, but that he needed time. Likewise, Sarah's money would soon run out, and she feared she wouldn't be able to continue paying the lawyer. Meanwhile, Diarra, one day when she saw that she could lose everything because her stepdaughter had claim rights too, decided to make peace with her. Suddenly, she invited her to eat. "My dear, excuse me for how I've treated you. I wanted to tell you about your father long before, but I was grieving so bad that I couldn't think of anything, and when I saw you, I put all my bitterness, anguish, and worry on you. Of course, you do deserve what your father left behind. It's not fair for you to be left with nothing. You don't need to have a lawyer. Tomorrow we can sign the papers of your inheritance. I'm so sorry. That's why I asked the maid to make you a delicious meal to make amends. Come, let's sit at the table. There are so many things to talk about." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. It seemed very strange to her. However, she didn't put buts and agreed to the small meeting. When suddenly the food was served, everything was fine. Until, unexpectedly, the girl fell into a deep sleep, and that was the last thing she remembered. Most likely, they put some sedative on her food, because she woke up in a desolate place in the middle of the jungle, with wild animals everywhere, without food and without water. She walked and walked for days. Fortunately, it rained, so she was able to drink something, until in the end, she couldn't resist and fainted. She was a city girl, and she just couldn't take it anymore. That's where she was found by the 4 aborigines. Now she was better, fate wanted to keep her alive somehow. She finally managed to recover and get her perspective about people who were far removed from civilization changed because she always heard horrible things from them. In the end, they turned out to be good people, and they never hurt her. It was thanks to them that she managed to get out of the jungle and reach the city, where she immediately presented her complaint to the police, who escorted her to her house. Likewise, she didn't need medical help, as she was healthy. That's how, when they arrived at the home, they found the employee who had fed her, who was scared when she saw her and confessed that the owner, Diarra, had ordered her to put a sleeping pill on the food, and then leave her in the middle of nowhere with the help of some bad people, because they believed that against the animals or wild tribes, no one would survive. Diarra and those involved were imprisoned by the law. That woman confessed that she wanted to take her away forever because she was afraid that her stepdaughter would take away what she already had. A day later, the police called Sarah as they had important information. According to the analyses that had just arrived, it turned out that her father had been poisoned on the day of his departure, and the most curious thing was that they found a vial of poison in the room that Diarra shared with him. Everything started to make sense. Diarra put her husband aside to keep all the fortune and business that he had achieved. What's more, she even cheated on him with one of her guards, and by the way, he was the one who helped her make this sinister plan so that they would keep everything. Diarra and her lover were sentenced to many years in prison, and Sarah was the only heir. Now, she could be happy, and surely her father will rest in peace. Likewise, she constantly visits the members of the tribe who saved her. She helps them with food and even offered them work, but none agreed because they're happy away from civilization. Maybe for them, civilization is a bad thing. As is known, Tanzania is a country full of tribes, aborigines who live isolated far from all civilization. There are those who say that they could do harm. Perhaps they're just trying to protect themselves, and I dare say that those who could cause more harm are ourselves. Many years have passed since then, and without a doubt karma exists, don't you think? I hope this video has served you. If so, feel free to give us a thumbs up, comment, and share. By the way, I invite you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell to receive the latest news about what we upload. Until next time.